Both Barbara and Gordon have covered quite a bit so far, and at the risk of being repetitive, I'm going to make a few comments. I mean, clearly the background of this arises from the whole issue of contentious parades. And in some respects, this is as it says in the draft or the introduction, this is the workings of the Hillsborough Agreement. And I suppose this is the means whereby they're going to maybe see a replacement of the Parades Commission. But I have to say, from a trade union point of view, that while there are issues there, I mean, our initial interest is in the impact that this is going to have on ordinary people struggling on the social and economic front and on the industrial front. And I think that's what the trade union's concern is. Whatever the intention, whether this is designed to ensure that the Northern Ireland Executive and the political parties in Stormont have the ability to stop demonstrations against cuts being introduced, which they're pushing through. Whether that is the case or not, whether that's the grand plan, whether it is a conspiracy or not, I don't think it matters, because the impact of this legislation, if it's implemented, will have a major impact upon the ability of ordinary people. And I say ordinary people, I'm talking about workers, ordinary people in the community who are standing up for their rights and need to get out onto the streets in some shape or form to demonstrate their position. The thing that struck me is it talks about well, firstly, I'm not sure we'll be much wiser, but we should know after reading this the difference between parades, protests, assemblies and public meetings, and I know there's an overlap. And they're all separately defined. But I mean, how can you tell when you're calling a demonstration whether you're going to get 49 or 51 people at it, and who's going to do the counting? I mean, you know, we've all been at demonstrations when we've maybe been a handful of us, but if we're, in our more successful days, maybe sometimes they're surprised. You get more than 50 people along, well, you're going to have to send the rest of them home because you're only allowed 49 or whatever. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the legislation that exists at the moment, even the legislation which exists at the moment, that's the sort of parades legislation, but also the public order. The trade unions have fallen foul on quite a number of occasions of that. For instance, there was a demonstration a number of years ago in relation to local government pensions, and we decided to take to the streets with hundreds, maybe 1,000 or 2 people, and Peter Bunting from the ICQ was given a formal caution because we haven't given notification that we just of a march. The same thing happened during the civil service pay dispute a number of years ago, whenever the then General Secretary NIPSA was given a caution. I think he's been a number of Peter and John Tory have a number of cautions, and that's on the existing legislation. We've heard about the protest against the anti-racist protest in response to attacks on ethnic minority people. We've heard about Vistians. Another one was the protest we had, I think it was last January before, in respect of Gaza. Murder and mayhem and oppression of people in another part of the world. And when the trade unions organised a demonstration in support of the people of Gaza, we would have had to give 37 days notice, and by that stage, well, all the murder and mayhem was over by that stage, and our voice wouldn't have been heard. So there's a whole, the BNP, BBC demonstration as well was another one. And to give you maybe a more mundane one, we had a lot of members, for instance, who work in the civil service, who have major difficulties in terms of what the pay that they get as a result of the use of a private company to deliver the payroll. It's HR Connect, but it's Fujitsu, so this is a multinational corporation. And when people don't get paid, or don't get paid properly at the end of the month, haven't they got the entitlement to go out en masse and go around and demonstrate outside Fujitsu's offices and say, where is our wages, because we can't live without it? And that would be banned under this legislation. Now, it has to be said that there is provision in the legislation for what seems to be called late notification and also an emergency procedure. I think we do need to know that. And it looks like if we were trying to organise a demonstration on short notice, on every occasion, I mean, there's very few trade union demonstrations which are organised given 37 days notice. It's unbelievable. But in respect of that, we would end up having to use what would be either the late notification procedure or the emergency procedure in order to go about our normal business. And in many ways that is going to be in the hands of a policeman or a police sergeant or a police inspector to decide whether or not you can have a demonstration or not. So this here, if it's allowed to go through, will have a major impact on the ability of ordinary people to defend their interests And we have talked about the public spending situation. We've had ongoing cuts for the last number of years. I mean, it's not just the 367 million which Sammy Wilson introduced earlier on this year, and you know, that's had a major impact. But we've been suffering from ongoing cuts to public expenditure through at least and more recently through the comprehensive spending review. We're talking, the Tories and the Lib Dems are talking about another £6 billion this year off the budget, and I think if you work that out in Northern Ireland terms through the Barnett formula, that's at least around about another 240 million. You add that to the 367 million, that gives you over £500 million. So and that's the start, and I'll not be long going up in the billion and above. So our ability to organise protests for ordinary people, protesting against either the UK government's imposition of the cuts or the Northern Ireland Executive's implementation of the cuts, is going to be severely restricted, and we can't allow that to happen. We'll know soon enough. Some of us got a phone call within the last number of days whenever noises about opposition to this bill were being raised. We got a phone call from the Secretariat in the OFM-DFM, and I'll have to say I detected a note of panic in the voice, wanting an immediate meeting, before Thursday night, before this meeting. I don't know, maybe it was to clarify what the position was, maybe it was to explain what they really meant. But 6 people who were commissioned or asked from the political parties to draft this legislation, obviously with quite a bit of advice from their civil service support. Whether or not they intended this, I mean, people will have their own views. We'll know very soon when we meet them early next week whether or not they intended this to have an impact upon the ability and the capacity of ordinary working people to defend their social, economic and industrial interests. We'll know that soon enough, because certainly what we'll be saying to them, what I'll be saying to them from that meeting, of course, is that this legislation, whatever the merits or demerits otherwise from a community point of view, and I know there are people on both sides of the community who have their own views in relation to the marches and parades and the right to march and the right to live without interference in their local areas. You know, that is an issue in itself. But the one thing I think that the trade unions will be asking is that if this wasn't the intention of the legislation or the originators of the legislation, then what they need to do is specifically exclude any protests relating to social, economic or industrial matters from this legislation. So they need to do that, because it can't be left to the discretion of the Justice Minister or of a senior policeman or anyone else to decide whether or not trade unions and community organisations fighting for their social and economic rights can have a right to protest in this part of the world. I leave it at that.